top to bottom, application layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and the physical layer at the bottom, right? So we are at the network layer now. The basic job of the network layer, as you all know, is to send your packet from source host to destination host across multiple networks, right? So it may be different types of networks again. So you need a common universal protocol which can be acceptable by all to use this particular platform, the internet, what we are using. For example, now also we are using the internet for this session, right? Or your WhatsApp, you are using the internet, your Facebook, you are using the internet. So for each and everything, almost all of us, whether it is students or transactions or merchants or bank or anything else, we are using the internet. So it's imperative that we would like to know what actually is the basic protocol behind all these no, operations what we are going to do. So hopefully you are able to see the screen.
Your share screen is lost.
Not there?
Yeah, not there. It went off.
Okay. How come? There now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think you can
Something
press
is coming.
Control F, sir. We'll go to full screen mode.
Should I make it full screen again?
Just press Control F.
Okay.
No. Go to the View tab, sir. It will be.
It's visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have the basic protocol in the network layer of the internet as the IP, the Internet Protocol version 4, and we have some auxiliary protocols to help the IP for doing its job, the ICMP, the IGMP, the ARP, and the reverse ARP, and so many things. So we'll be basically concentrating on IP, the Internet Protocol, for routing your datagrams from source to destination across multiple networks. So the basic design of the IP was to keep it simple. And the earlier days, as you all know, the history of the internet, it was started from 1969 through ARPANET. So earlier days when internet started and through IETF, all these RFCs were drafted and all. So this much of volume or the traffic was not envisioned, right? What we are using as on today. For including voice calls to multimedia and everything. So they thought it's better to keep the IP protocol very simple, not to put too many operations into it. So they made it as a best effort service. So in the sense that the protocol tries to take your data, but it doesn't guarantee any delivery. It doesn't guarantee that your data may you will reach in a particular time limit. It doesn't guarantee you the delay. It doesn't guarantee you the delivery. There may be out of order delivery. There may be a kind of data loss or packet loss. So many things are possible with IP. Okay, but even then we are still using that because that is the one which has been envisioned and designed for us through the years. So this is the protocol stack. Hopefully you're able to visualize and remember this from the first module. So just for your recalling that, I have just put it. So we are looking into this. Okay, I'm not able to do the annotation here. Okay, that's a problem, I think. Yeah. So can I do the annotation, Gaurav? No.
I think you can do it, sir.
Because for that I need to again come back from the full screen mode to somewhere else, so it will be difficult anyway. So we'll see. So the IPv4, as we all see here, is a connectionless, unreliable protocol providing best effort delivery service using datagram approach to forward the packets. Okay. This and all you studied earlier, so I'm just not going in detail about this. This is how we define the IPv4 operation. It's a connectionless operation. That means in advance there need not be a connection setup between the source and destination. That's the advantage of IPv4, but it is unreliable because it doesn't guarantee you anything. Okay, there can be data loss, data can be corrupted, packet may be undelivered, packet may be delivered out of order, packet may be delayed, or whatever it is. So it will provide your best effort service for that. Okay. So if you want more reliability and all, you need to use the IP with the upper layer protocol called the TCP. Okay. So this is the IPv4 datagram format. What generally all the question paper and all, if you see, they will ask you this format to understand. So basically the datagram or the packet will have a header followed by the data or the payload, what we call, coming from the upper layer. So you have a minimum 20 bytes header and maximum 60 bytes header. As it is shown here. If you are able to see the mouse operation, you can just check here, 20 to 60 bytes. but total packet size can be up to 65,535 bytes. This is the IP datagram. So we will be explaining first the header part only, because payload is the data coming from upper layer. It can be anything. It can be a message or a text or a video, audio, image, or whatever. So header is like this. So header is minimum 20 bytes and maximum 60 bytes. So 20 bytes is a mandatory header, what we call. So this 20 byte header has these white colored boxes, you can see, have been divided into 5 different rows, easy to understand. So each row is of 4 bytes. That means you have 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, that is 20 bytes. Each row of 4 bytes, that is 32 bits. And in that we have certain fields to represent all the operations and the characteristics of IPv4. Okay. So hopefully you know this diagram. So I'll be just going ahead with that. So I'm explaining from row 1, row 2, something like that. So you can easily at least memorize this for the examination purpose, or easy to understand also. So I have given you like this. I have prepared the slides in this way. So the version number, the first 4 bits of the first row refers to version number, which is IP version 4 now. Actually, now we have version 6. But we are still in the syllabus, we have IP version 4, so we are looking into version 4 only. So this will be 0100, because in binary 4 is 0100, right? And the next field will be again 4 bit, which is HLEN. HLEN stands for header length. Okay, header length. That means actually this is not actually header length. This is a value which should be multiplied by 4 to get the total header length. Okay, so this value should be minimum 5 and maximum 15. The header length will be in bytes, which will be HLN value in this field. In decimal you write that and multiply by 4, then you get the actual value of header length. So because we said header length is 20 bytes minimum, because that is mandatory, so minimum HLN value should be 5, because 5 multiplied by 4 is 20, and maximum is 60 bytes, we said, including options here. So that means maximum HLN value can be 1111, which is 15 in decimal. Okay, that's how it is. Then service type, earlier it was called as type of service, so now it is called as differentiated services. This is with respect to QoS, providing quality of service like reliability, or you want throughput, you want delay or something like that. So which one you want to maximize, based on that you can give that. Okay, then total length, next field, the last field in the first row is 16 bits total length. This indicates the total length of the datagram we are sending, up to maximum of what is given here, 65,535 bytes. Okay, that is the total length. Total length means it is including header as well as the payload or the data. Okay, so the data length would be, you can see that the yellow box, the last one. So your payload length will be total length minus header length, and header length we have already calculated using this formula earlier. So you can easily calculate, because this can be a numerical question to you in the exam also. It will be very easy to score marks. So if you are just able to do it, very simple LKG mathematics. Okay, and there is no integration, differentiation, or anything. It's just addition, subtraction, multiplication. That's it. Okay, so let us go to row 2 now. Row 2 of the datagram has first 16 bit as identification. This is the packet sequence number. Just remember like that. It is identifying the packet from the source. So each time the packet is sent out from the source will start numbering it from a random number initially, as a positive number, of course. And every time a new packet is sent or a datagram is sent, it will increment by 1. Okay. And if at all the packet is fragmented, that is packet size is too large to pass through a network, and you try to break it into pieces called fragments, all fragments will have the same ID, because they all belong to the same packet. Okay. Then there are 2 more fields called flags and fragmentation offset. So these will be used along with fragmentation, which I'll explain little later after all these things. Then coming to the third row again 32 bits. The first 8 bit is TTL, time to live. You can easily understand this like a human being, how much, like we also take birth and take death sometime. So that means you have a lifetime or a life cycle. Similarly, the packet in the internet also should have a life cycle. Otherwise, it will be simply wandering in the network without reaching the destination. So we are limiting the maximum number of hops through which this packet can go through. So TTL refers to the maximum number of hops. So it is 8-bit field. So maximum is 255. So what is done is, initially a number will be set, a positive integer will be set for this when the source is sending that packet, and at every router this number will be decremented by 1, and once it reaches 0, if it has not yet reached the destination, that router will discard this packet as an orphan packet because it is not supposed to create unnecessary traffic in the internet. So that is TTL. It's a very important field for understanding that the packet has a lifetime in the internet. It cannot simply be there for indefinite time. Okay. Then the next field is protocol, which is 8-bit. As we have seen already, the payload comes from the upper layer, or some other protocols will use the service of IP. First module, if you remember, you have that multiplexing and all. So several upper layer protocols or other protocols can take the service of IP like TCP, UDP, ICMP and all. So which protocol is using that service of IP? That protocol, this particular field. Okay. Then coming to the checksum. Checksum is a error detection method using one's complement by adding all the things. This is in chapter 10. If you have already gone through it, it will be known to you, or else we will show that in an example how to take the bits in 16-bit numbers, add them and wrap it around for 16-bit modulo, and then take a ones complement, and that would be the checksum. Okay, for header error detection. Then this is the protocol set what we said. So this is your IP. So TCP will use IP, UDP will use IP, ICMP will also use IP. So many other protocols will use IP. So each protocol will have some number. So one or two you can remember, like for TCP, if it is using IP, the protocol field will have 06, and UDP is using IP, protocol field will have 17, something like that. Okay, coming to now row 4. Row 4 is very easy. It's a source IP address which is 32-bit. In module 3, you have already studied IPv4 addresses, if you remember that, which are 32-bit decimal dotted notation. So it's a 32-bit your source IP address. Next row is 32-bit your destination IP address, right? So these 5 rows are mandatory, fixed part of the IPv4. Then row 6 is options. If at all you have some QoS and other important things required, you can go for options. This is not mandatory to be a part of the header. If it is there, then only it can be used. Otherwise, it need not be used. Okay. So now coming to that fragmentation part, what I said. So if the datagram is passing through several networks, like it will go through some wireless LAN or a wired LAN or something. So in module 2, you would have studied wired LAN Ethernet. Not to free. So the maximum size of the frame was 1518 bytes, 1518 bytes, right? So that means if you have 65,535 bytes in your packet and it has to go through a wired LAN, the LAN won't accept it because the maximum size is 1500 bytes. So it means you have to fragment your original payload or your original datagram. Fragment means and break it into smaller pieces. So that is called as fragmentation. That process is called as fragmentation. So the restriction imposed by that underlying network for sending your data is called as MTU, maximum transfer unit. So how much you can transfer through that network, and that will refer from one network to another network. It is not a fixed one. Okay. So MTBU is defined by a particular network through which the data is passing through. Okay. Very simple thing is like if you are coming towards a MG road, you may have a traffic restriction that only 10 vehicles may pass through. If you are going to on a highway, there may not be any restriction. Any number of vehicles can pass through, something like that. So similarly, each network has its own limitation about the data carrying capacity. Okay. So this is the MTU which will be varying. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So now this is how it can be. So IP datagram needs to be divided into smaller size blocks called as fragments. Okay. And fragments need not be of the same size. They may be of different sizes as well. Okay. And normally fragmentation can be done by source, or it can. Then all 4 should arrive at the destination so that it can become a single packet again. So only destination would do the reassembly of this. Okay. And since all the fragments belong to the same packet, they will also have the header. Okay. So with flags and fragmentation offset and total length. Okay. So what are the flags in that particular IPv4 datagram format? You can again recall that diagram. So I'll just show you once again here. This is what second row we are looking into now. The flags which are 3 bits and fragmentation of it is 13-bit. So okay. Oh, sorry, something happened. Okay. So Okay, so this is the fragmentation. Okay, so the first bit is the reserved. The second bit in that field is called as defleet, which is do not fragment bit. Uh, I think I don't have annotations here, so I don't have an option of annotation. Hopefully, you will be able to catch it the same way. Okay, okay. So the do not fragment bit, and if its value is 1, it means the router should not fragment this bit. That means it's a very important data. Maybe the source has already identified that the packet should go as it is. Of course, if it is more than the size of the MTU, it will be dropped because it cannot be fragmented. Okay. The next bit is called as M bit, or the more fragment bit. So this, if this value is 1, it means that there are more fragments to arrive. This is an indication to the next device that there are more fragments of the same packet or same datagram. So except the last, all fragments of the packet will have M bit as 1. The last fragment will have the M bit as 0, because that is the last one. No more fragments. You can remember, like in digital electronics, like M and complement of M. M equal to 1 means more. M equal to 0 means no more. That is, this is the last one, something like that. Then fragmentation offset. Now the question is, whenever we fragment the data from the original packet, we should know the relative position of that fragment in the packet, right? So if you have done, just like you take a long train and divide that train into some 3 or 4 blocks. So where is coach number 10 with respect to the original engine? Where is coach number 20 from the original engine? That much offset should be known to us. Then only we can calculate the address of each fragment, right? So that is why this fragmentation offset field is there. Okay, so this will show the relative position of the fragment with respect to the whole datagram. It will be in terms of units of 8 bytes. Okay, so we will take an example from the book I have taken directly, so it will be easy to understand in case you refer to the book also. So let us say we have a packet of size 4000 bytes, which is divided into 3 fragments. Need not be of the same size anyway. So first fragment is 1400 bytes. Next fragment is also 1400 bytes. Okay, that becomes 2800. The last will be 1200 bytes. Totally 4000 bytes. Okay. So you can see this diagram. So you have totally 4000 bytes of packet, bytes in that packet. You are dividing it into 3 boxes or 3 fragments. First will be 0 to 1399, that is 1400 bytes, 1400 to 2799, and then 2800 to 3999. Okay, so this is how you try to see. So how do you find the offset? What you do is you just take the first number and divide by 8. That's it. So what is the first number? It is starting 0. So 0 by 8 will be 0. The the byte of the second fragment is starting at 1400. You just divide by 8, it will be 175. So offset of the second fragment with respect to the original datagram is 175. Okay, and third fragment, the first byte is 2800 divided by 8, it will be 350. Okay, so this way it is just a very easy calculation. In case they ask you also, you can easily do it. So you divide your packet into number of fragments of whatever the size you want, the number of bytes in decimal format, and then the first byte number whatever is there divided by 8, that gives you the offset. Okay, this is another way to show that. I think you can read that later also. So what is the meaning here is, suppose you have 3 fragments, you can see F1, F2, F3, and this is the router through which it is passing. But you can see here F1 and F3 are passing through this, that is this path, the horizontal path. F2 has come like this. That is why we said earlier IP is a connectionless protocol. It means there is no virtual circuit established between the source and destination. The packets may travel from packets from the same source to the same destination may travel through different paths. Okay, it's very important to remember that. So some may reach faster, some may reach later also. That's how it is. And some may be lost because that path is corrupted or something. Like link is a broken link or whatever, something like that. And now another thing is this, already the source has made 3 fragments, F1, F2, F3. This router is also fragmenting second one, F2, as 2.1 and 2.2, that is 2.1 and 2.2. What is the meaning? You can fragment an already fragmented packet. So multiple levels of fragment, like nested loops, what you study in C programming and all like that. Number of, I mean, the fragmentation can be done number of times based on the network through which you are passing through. Suppose the first network has a capacity of 5,000 bytes, you are fragmented into 5,000 bytes only. The next network is having capacity of only 2,000 bytes and 5,000 bytes cannot pass through. Then again, you have to break it into maximum of 2,000 bytes. That's how several levels of fragmentation is also possible. That's the indication in this diagram. Okay, that's how it is shown. So some simple example to understand these things, maybe you would have already done this also. So I'm just showing one or two here. So you can just understand what is the meaning of those bytes and other thing, bits and other things. Okay. So an IPv4 packet has arrived with the first 8 bits as some number, and the receiver is discarding this packet Y. And this can be again 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks, numerical questions in the exam, or can be a Viva in your laboratory. You have the corresponding lab, computer networks lab. So better to know some of these terminologies and these examples. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. Slide not changing. Somebody is giving that message. Slide not changing. Slide movement is there. Are you able to see that example 1, example 2, etc.?
Sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Somebody has sent a message saying that slide is not moving. That's why. So I just verified. Okay. Fine. So how do you identify this IPv4? You have to write in binary format, of course, all the values, then take it in hexadecimal or whatever. So you must remember the fields of each row. That's very important to do any numerical example or to write in the Viva question in the exam, lab exam or whatever. The first row, if you remember, the first field was version, then it was hlen. Okay, the first 4 bits, next 4 bits. So should be able to remember the field as well as the number of bits reserved for that field. That way only should be able to do that. Otherwise, you can't do these calculations. Okay, so you should be exactly knowing that. So the first field, first 4 bit was version, right? Which we have said. The next 4 bit was hlen field. And I have already said the hlen value should be minimum 5 because that should be multiplied by 4 to get the minimum header length. So here the value is 0010 in binary, which means 2. So it cannot be a valid hlen number. That is why the receiver is discarding this packet that way. Okay. Now the second question is little more interesting. Suppose you have a packet with hlen value as 1000, that is in binary. The suffix says which is the base, okay, radix of the system. 16 means hexadecimal, 10 means decimal, 2 means binary. Okay, and how many bytes of options are being carried? So hlen value in decimal you take, which will be 8. Multiply by that, multiply this by 4, which becomes 32. That means total header length is 32. Mandatory header length is 20 bytes, we said. So options will be 32 minus 20, which is 12 bytes something. So this way you can be able to solve this thing. Okay. So some examples are there anyway. So later I'll be sharing this with madam also. So you can as well go through. So if you have any question, you can ask me so that I will go to the next topic. I'm just brushing up in case, no, because we can't do the entire thing
Slides are
here.
not changing.
Yeah.
Slides are not changing, sir. It's like still in page 8.
Slides are not there. Slides are not there. Why? Okay, slides are not changing. Okay, let me see. Now,
No, sir, it's still in page 8.
still in page 8. After that, it is not changing. Okay. Now,
No, sir, it's still in page 8 only, sir. I think some network problem on your side, maybe.
okay. So what can be? Okay, let us see. I'll try to do the other one. I'll just try to show the other one. So please check whether this is visible now. I'm going to do routing protocols. So is it visible now?
No, sir.
It's also not visible.
Stuck in page 8.
I'll just try to share again. Let me see. Visible now, chapter 20.
It's loading, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now is it
It's visible.
visible? Routing protocols introduction, something is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, fragmentation, something?
It's still loading.
I'm just switching from one tab to another tab. That's why I'm just verifying. Now, is it visible, the fragmentation thing?
It's still loading, sir. I'm getting like you're starting your
Okay.
content and
Maybe while I'm switching from one tab to another, it is taking time. Okay. Anyway, I'll go to the routing protocols. This
now
will
I
be
can
more
see, sir.
important. This will be more
I can see.
important anyway. So you
Yeah,
can just,
fine.
so
Now we are able to see, sir. Fine.
routing protocols is available. Okay. On the screen available. Okay, fine. Very important from the lab point of view. You have no two programs also on this, two or three programs, link state routing, distance vector routing and all. And of course, theory also they'll be asking this question, and it will be very interesting to understand how your internet works with respect to the routing of your data from source to destination. A very interesting thing. So hopefully, I'll be able to give you some insight into this. So we have two types of routing: unicast and multicast. That means if you have only one single destination, it is unicast routing. If you have multiple destinations, it is multicast routing. Both the strategies are completely different. So we will be discussing only unicast routing as per our syllabus. Okay. And routing is basically what? Even though we say from source to destination, a source is attached to the router in that network. So it is source router. Similarly, a destination attached to the router of that network, the default router, so which is again the destination router. So it means from source router to destination router across multiple routers and networks, your data is going through. So every router should forward it. So that's why you should have some forwarding tables. That's the basic philosophy of any routing algorithm. Okay. Uh, this is what is the meaning. So now, since I already said the IP is the one, that is the internet uses a best effort service to deliver your packet, the path is, so there can be several routes from a source to destination. Similar to very simple example analogy, what I can give is like from your home to your college, you can have multiple paths, right? Every day you need not go through the same path. So you choose the path based on many parameters. Maybe if it's an examination, you want to reach early, you may go through a shortcut. You want to miss your classes, you don't want to go to college, you can take a longer route and you can reach after 2 hours. Right? I mean, I think most of the students will do that also anyway, right? So that means you have a lot of options for you to reach from your home to your college. So several paths, even though source is fixed and destination is fixed. Same way here, when I am transferring my data through the internet, even though I know the source and destination, the paths need not be fixed. Path can be many for the same pair, source and destination pair. So, and you have to choose a path. So what is the basic job of a routing protocol? The protocol job is to choose a path based on some metrics or some parameters. Okay. What are the parameters I have given in this red colors? You can just think of that. Parameters can be like hop count, or it can be delay, like I want to reach the destination with minimum delay. That can be one method. Or I want to reach the destination through a minimum number of intermediate nodes or minimum number of hops. Or I want to reach the destination with minimum cost, or I want to use minimum bandwidth. For example, if all of you now use video also, then naturally more bandwidth will be consumed. I am also not switching on my video. So if I use only audio, then the bandwidth consumed will be less. So I have a lot of options to choose for my metric. Okay, that's how it is. Which is best? Again, there is nothing called as the best here. Minimum delay, or minimum hop, or maximum bandwidth utilization, or minimum cost, or maximum reliability. So we can have so many things like that. Okay, any of these parameters should be optimized. So one thing you should remember is we are trying optimal path, but in general we call it as a shortest. Shortest need not be shortest in literal sense. Okay, don't look into that English as shortest. So if I say shortest, it may be delay, because I want to reach it in minimum delay. So if I want to go from here to Delhi, if I take a flight I may reach in 2 hours, but I have to pay say rupees 5,000, which is more cost, but delay is less. So I cannot optimize all the parameters at the same time. Please remember that. So you should wisely choose what parameter you want to optimize. So you want to reduce your cost of traveling from here to Delhi, you go by train. You may take 2 days, but you may have to pay only 500 rupees instead of 5,000 rupees. So it means you have reduced your cost, but you have increased your delay. So there are a lot of such options. Okay. So it is not that you have to, I mean, you can maximize or minimize only one. That's why we use optimize. It can be either minimization or maximization. Okay. Throughput should be maximized, not minimized. Delay should be minimized that way. So depending on your metric, you optimize your paths. Okay. And the best way of understanding this is a simple concept. As I said, now city to city, you just write, make a road map or something. So you have to go from say here to Delhi, say via Chennai or via Hyderabad or via Bombay or via Kolkata or something. So you have multiple intermediate stations for you before you reach the destination, right? So you just identify it as a graph, and that all the circles will indicate the nodes or the cities, and cities are linked, as we all know, right, through some physical link through road or whatever it is. Similar way, I can take my as an example of an internet as a graph. Like this is the actual internet, that is the graph that my network routers and all. But without showing the technical details, I can simply write the right side one. You can see the graph as nodes, and nodes are connected through what are known as edges or links. So your two cities are connected by uh, transmission media, something like that. Okay, so two nodes are connected by some transmission media, maybe wired or wireless, but some media, maybe a satellite link, maybe a coaxial link or optical fiber or whatever it is. And moreover, we also like to know the metric, the cost metric of that, whether it is I have to shell out no, 2 rupees, or is it 2 kilometers away from me, or is it taking 2 seconds to reach the destination. So some cost metrics should be written on top of the edge. Okay, so each edge is associated with a cost. So this kind of a graph is called as a weighted graph. This is this weight or a cost, this 2 5 whatever is written here, something. So this is how we try to visualize our internet, and this is a very simple one. And as we all know, the today's internet with no, millions of nodes and millions of routers, this will be a too simple thing to analyze. Same thing you will be implementing in the lab also, similar to this only. Okay, so what is our basic idea in any routing, which is called as generally least cost routing. In your book, they are using this word, so I am using that word, least cost. Again, please don't take it literally in the English sense. Cost doesn't mean that it is only cost. It can be distance, delay, hop count, bandwidth, throughput, reliability. It can be anything, whatever we choose. Okay, you should optimize that. That's all. So what is the easy way? You find the least cost path between the two, that is source and the destination. So what is the easy way? Each router, that is each of these routers, should find the least cost path from itself to all other nodes. So that means you are able to connect to everybody else. That's how it is. Okay, that is called as least cost. Again, we use this is like a graph theory data structure notation from computer science. That's why we are using those names. So from the graph, we make a tree. So you can see easily this graph. If you have studied mathematics, I think you know about graph. A graph has loops, right? For example, this is a loop. Like suppose your data goes from A to B, E, D, and comes back to A. It is wrong actually, right? That means your data, what is sent out, should not come back to you. So you should avoid the loops in the network always. That's one of the biggest challenge in routing. That's why we create a tree out of the graph. A tree is a loopless graph. That means you can reach every node without forming a cyclic path. That is called as a tree. That is called as a least cost tree. Okay. So how do we find the least cost tree? There are different methods. So we will see that in the next slide again. Okay. So a least cost tree is a tree with the source router as the root that spans the whole graph. That means it actually completes the whole graph, and in which the path between the root and the any other node is the shortest. Okay. So you can see these are the trees generated for each node. For a root node, I start from A as my source. How do I reach B? How do I reach G? How do I reach E? Something like that. I can have multiple paths, but I have chosen one based on some metric. So for that, we need to run an algorithm. Okay. That means all routers in the background will be running that algorithm, either DVR or LSR, something like that. So this is how you can say, and you can easily see now there are no loops, right? There is no cyclic path anywhere. You can reach from any city to any city without revisiting your city. That's a simple traveling salesman's problem, right? So you have to reach from your city to the destination city without revisiting your city again. There's no point in coming back to your city only. So that is the one which you have to do in any routing. Okay. So we try to define some or design some general routing algorithms. What are the different algorithms are there anyway, but they differ in the way they interpret the word cost. Correct? The cost can be anything like this, and how they create this least cost tree for each node. See, in these two methods they differ, but all of them should do this. All of them should do this. So there are two types of algorithms: dynamic and static. And of course, static means already the path is fixed, like a virtual circuit approach if you study in module 3, similar to that. But now generally we don't use that because it will be wastage of resources for that. And on an internet like a dynamic network like ours, we can't predict the traffic always, so we can't use the static algorithms. So we go for dynamic algorithms. So that means the paths can be changed based on the need, based on the failures, based on so many other parameters. That's why it's called as adaptive. Okay. So the path is not fixed for every time the source and destination are connected. So three basic routing algorithms: distance vector, which is based on Bellman-Ford equation; link state routing, the based on the Dijkstra algorithm; the path vector routing. These are the three important in your book as per that, and very important from general concept of routing in the internet also. So what is DVR? Each node will create its own least cost tree. I have just given in points so that it will be easy to remember and write in the exam also. How it will talk to its neighbors, immediate neighbors. Immediate neighbors are the one which are directly connected. Okay. For example, in this diagram, if I say A and B are immediate neighbors and A and D are immediate neighbors because they are directly connected. A and E, even though on the graph it looks very similar, but they are not neighbors because A and E are not directly connected. Okay. Please remember that. So the cost of reaching from A to E is initially infinity. Why? Because A doesn't know where is E. A knows about B and A knows about only D. So that least cost is known from the neighbors. A in the beginning, A doesn't know about E. That's the meaning. Okay. So when they are unconnected or unreachable, we assume the cost to be infinity. Okay. So this is the first one. So incomplete trees are exchanged. Sorry. Sorry, anything?
No, sir, you can continue, sir.
Okay. Visible, right? Yeah, thank you. So incomplete trees are exchanged. Why I say incomplete? First time when you boot up, you know only about your neighbors. You are just making hello exchanges between your neighbors, so you don't know about anybody else. So your tree is incomplete. But that means you do not know about more of other neighbors which are not there along with you or which are not directly connected to you. So you need to periodically exchange with your neighbors and they will update you and you should update. So this is all the process which will be explaining there. For that, we use a very famous Bellman-Ford equation designed by those people. Okay. So what is this Bellman-Ford equation? This is used to find a least cost or the shortest distance between a source node X and a destination node Y through some intermediate nodes, just like I gave the example of here to Delhi, via Hyderabad, via Chennai, via Kolkata, via Bombay or whatever. So there are so many intermediate nodes available to me. I have to find the least cost. So that is the minimum of X to Y, minimum of this simple one. So that means I am connected to A. I know if I am X, I am connected to A. I know the cost of reaching from X to A. And A tells me how to reach Y. That means
Stop verification. Every lab ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಕೌಂಟ್ ಯಾರು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್
ನೀವು ಸೈನ್ ಹಾಕಿ ಜೋಡಿ ಕಡೆ
ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ವೆರಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್
ನೀವು ಲ್ಯಾಬ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅನಿಲ್ ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ನೋಡಿ, ಅದೇ ಫಾರ್ಮೆಟಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಬಿಡಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಅದೇ ಸೇಮ್ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ.
ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್,
ಅದರಲ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ನಿಮ್ದು ಲೆಡ್ಜರ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಓವರ್ ಮಾಡಿದಿರಲ್ವಾ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಸೈನ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕು. ಅಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲ ಆ ಫಾರ್ಮೆಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ ನೋಡಿ, ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಡಿ. ನೀವು ಸೈನ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀನಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ. So CXA, sorry, CXA plus DAY. Okay, so that means you can go from X to A and you can reach from to Y. So you have this cost added to you. You can go from X to B, and from B also you can go to Y. So find out all the such paths and then find the minimum out of them in the beginning. So you find there is a minimum path available or minimum least cost path available. Later you want to update because some of the links can be broken or some of the cost may be changed or weights may be changed, something would have happened, so you want to update it again. So you have another equation for that. So you already know your minimum value, but if some other node tells via Z that you can reach Y via me through a least cost, then I'll update that. Okay, that is how it is. So that is how this diagram looks like. So you have X, you have Y. So you can go from X to A and A to Y, X to B and B to Y, and X to C and C to Y. But minimum among those you can choose. And once you choose, you have your own path and your own value. And after that, you will have an updation required if a new value coming to you through your periodic exchange is lesser than the value which you are already having. Okay, that's how it is. So that is the meaning of this Bellman-Ford equation. Second point about this is what do you mean by the distance vector? The name is given as distance vector algorithm. The least cost tree was what we have said earlier is like a graphical notation, right? Of course, for writing and all, it becomes very good on pen and paper, but to implement using a program or a software is easy if I try to take it as an array or something like that. So a distance vector is nothing but a one-dimensional array of that least cost tree. That's all. Okay, simple one. So this is the least cost tree. This is the distance vector. That means you will write for each node how to reach from that node to all other node and write the cost of that inside the array. So suppose node A is your reference node. A to A is 0 because you are in the same city. You want to go from A to B. Let us say you find the cost as 2 rupees. A to C is, let us say, rupees 7. A to D is, let us say, rupees 3 something. So all these cells must have non-infinity values. Is that very clear? All these cells will have non-infinity values, but it will not be there in the beginning. It will be there after multiple such exchanges only. What do you mean by non-infinity? Infinity means not reachable, as I said, not connected, because I do not know how to reach the other one. Once I get the information from my neighbors, I will update my table. Okay. So what is the next one? Third one is DVR operation. What is the actual meaning of how the distance vector routing operates? One is initializing your tables. So each node, when it is booted, it will send some greeting messages and discovers its neighbors, and it finds the initial distance vector when all nodes are booted. Of course, all nodes need not be booted at the same time. They can be asynchronously done. Okay. So value of infinity means the cost to that node is unknown, or it is not the immediate neighbor, or the link is broken, something. So this is how it is generally. So when you start your network, A knows about only B and D. You can see here only 2 values are there, all remaining are infinity. Similarly, B knows about C, E and A, and remaining all infinity. This is the initialization of distance vector when the system is booted up. First phase of DVR is that. Second phase is updating the tables. So each node is created its vector. It sends a copy of the vector to all its neighbors. Okay. And after a node receives a distance vector from its neighbor, it updates its vector using the Bellman-Ford equation. Okay. And as we know, this is not one time, this is iterative. That means multiple times the exchanges will be happening until all the nodes have all the distance vectors with no infinity values. So it will take a large number of iterations if the number of nodes are huge. Okay. So that's why we need to use a while loop kind of a thing in the program. If you have already done a program, you will be knowing that, right? So this is how it is updating. How do you update? You update means you take your old, suppose A is sending that vector to B, let us say, this interaction, let us see. A is sending its vector to B. B already has its own vector. That means it knows something about the topology already. A sends this information, and then now B finds that using the Bellman-Ford, what is the minimum of, whether what I know is the minimum, or what I get from A is the minimum. Based on that, B will create a new table, something like this. And it is adding 2 plus y2, because to reach from A to B to A, you need 2 units, no, or rupees 2 as a cost, or 2 kilometers or whatever. So the 2 has to be added for that. That is the meaning of this particular equation here. The square box indicates the entire vector. That means each value in the cell will be updated if the new value is lesser than the old value. For example, here D was infinity here earlier. It means B was thinking that I cannot reach D because it was not an immediate neighbor. But A said you can reach D via me with a cost of 3. So you can see this. If you are able to see the mouse here, you can see that. So B to A is 2 rupees and A to D is 3 rupees. So 2 plus 3 is 5. So we'll be summing them. So now B will update it as 5 and 5 is less than infinity. So definitely 5 would be there in the cell. Like that, every node will periodically exchange, or if there is an event also, it will exchange. In the sense, if there is a new thing appearing, immediately it will send to other nodes also. This is how it will be done. Okay. So this is a theory for that to write in the exam. So this much is enough. If they ask you specifically write DVR algorithm, then you have to write this algorithm as it is from the book. It's a pseudo code, what you are actually doing in the lab also. So if initialization is, if you are myself, your distance is 0, then for all other nodes, if the y is a neighbor, then you know the cost already because that weight will be there to you. If it is not a neighbor, it is infinity. So this will be initialization step. Then once you initialize, you send your distance vector to all other neighbors. Then each node will operate its vector with respect to the received one, right? So it means for all that, wait for the update from the other nodes, and for all that y to 1 to n nodes, assuming that there are n nodes in your, please remember this, our repeat forever is a while true loop. It's a like infinite loop. It will no, converge only when all the cells have a finite value. Internally, we have a for loop because we know the number of nodes in that. But how many times the exchanges will be done is not known to us. And when the system stabilizes is not known. That's called as convergence. So we have an outer while loop and inner for loop. So using your Bellman-Ford equation, you would be updating this. And then once you update, once again you change the, send it to your vectors, other neighbors. Okay, this is how it is. This is about DVR, and there are some problem in DVR which is slow convergence, takes long time. Another problem with this two node instability problem or something. That means this is a famous saying that good news propagates fast and bad news propagates slowly, something like that. So if there is a broken link or anything, that information should be given to all the neighbors immediately so that they can update their tables. But if it is not done so, then there will be a problem of instability. That means they will not converge fast, and they will try to know about that broken link or infinity cost after a very long time. So till that time, the system is unstable. That's what generally is the problem. If they ask you specifically about two node instability or count to infinity problem, they'll ask you something like this. Then only you write this. If they ask about only DVR, previously what I told is enough. Okay. So shall I go to the next one? This diagram is there anyway, and there are solutions for that, what are known as split horizon and then Poisson reverse. Small theory I have given anyway, so it's easy to write in the exam if it is asked that way. Okay. So another important routing algorithm is called as link state routing. Again, this very famous one. Basically, link state routing converges fast compared to the links, the DVR, but it is consuming more bandwidth and more memory and more processing that way. Okay. So comparison is given at the end. So what is the meaning of link state here? That cost of the link, we said that edges, no, that weight or something, that cost of the link is called as link state. And the idea is to find, again, same thing, the, the link with the least value, that is lower cost, same name, but just to understand in a different way, they have given these terminologies here. Okay. And one difference between, major difference between DVR and LSR is, in DVR, each node will send to its neighbors what it knows about the complete network. Okay. Fine. Whereas in LSR, that is this algorithm what we are trying to discuss now, each node actually informs all other nodes about its neighbors. So just a reverse way of propagating the information. That's it. There's nothing else. For that, we use different terminologies. So I'm trying to use from the book itself. So each node will create that least cost tree, as we said. All of them will become what is known as a linked state database. That means all that one-dimensional vectors, what we have seen in the earlier, if you make it as a complete map for the entire network, A to A to B, A to C, similarly B to A, B to C, B to D, like a two-dimensional matrix, then it becomes a linked state database. That's what is shown here. So you can see horizontally on the row also A, B, C, D, E, F, G, column also A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Initially, when the cost is not known, it is infinity. Again, same analogy and same operation. Infinity should not be there in any of these matrix elements or the cells. That's all. Okay. So the LSDB can be represented as a two-dimensional array or a matrix. Okay, that's how it is. The second question will be how to create this LSDB. So the one, because it needs to know the entire network, so there may be a lot of packet exchanges which may create congestion in the network. So to avoid that, only link state packet is sent between all the nodes through what is known as flooding. Okay, simple thing for you is flooding is broadcasting to all except yourself. That means whenever you get a link state packet or update, you send it on all outgoing links of your router except on the incoming link. That is, don't send it back to the same node from which you have received. So that way you can stop creating a lot of traffic on the internet. Okay, so that is how it is. So what do you take from the link state packet? You take the identity of the node, that is node number or node name or whatever, and the cost of the link. This is called as the LSP, link state packet. So each LSP is sent out of each interface. You can see here. Suppose A gives to B and B will be sending that or forwarding that to E and C. It should not forward back to A that way. Suppose B gets something from C, that can be forwarded to A that way. Okay, that is how it is done. Okay. So how do we find what is good, or I mean what is required or what is not required? That is called a LSR operation. So you already have a link state packet with you and you get something from some other neighbor. So which one you keep, the old one or the new one? So you should have some kind of a mechanism to analyze that. So you'll have some numbering schemes. So if you have a LSP with a new number which is higher than the first one, okay. So if the newly arrived LSP is older than the already it is having, then it will discard this. And if the new ASP is the newer one, in the sense it is the newer number compared to the older number, then you keep this copy. Okay, that's how it is. So for example, you have LSP 1, 2, 3, 4. Let us say sent in the same order. 1 sent earlier, 2 sent after that, 3 sent after that. And now you already have LSP 3 with you. Let us say someone sends LSP 1 to you. When 1 is the oldest one because first number. So that means you don't keep it. Suppose someone sends LSP 4 to you. 4 is the latest update because you have 3. So you will be keeping 4 that way. Okay. So that's how you try to discard your packets and then update your tables. Again, it takes time. Not a lot of iterations are needed for this. Okay. So this note I have given just to illustrate the difference between DVR and LSR. The fourth one, after creating LSDB, you have to create that least cost tree. What is the meaning of least cost tree? As you said, from one node or one router, we should be able to reach all other routers in the network with least cost. Okay, that's how it is. So that is using the Dijkstra algorithm. Some theory I have added 1 or 2 steps just to memorize this. But if they ask you only Dijkstra algorithm, please write only this much and explain in your own sentence, or you can use this whatever I have given earlier. Again, same thing. You create a tree in the sense what? Again, we have said earlier, graphically it is better to write as a tree with a root node going up to the leaf node, passing through several nodes, something like that, finding the least cost at every iteration or every step like that. Okay. So for that, we identify a root node and you keep them in, that means you create 2 sets of nodes, easy way. If you study, I mean in mathematics you studied set theory, right? So it's better to remember that way. So initially your set has, say, what you call, suppose you have 7 nodes, let us say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Initially you start with A. So you have a set with only A as your node, which is known to you. Others will be in the second set. Let us say one set is called as permanent set, other set is called as a temporary set or tentative set, something. So our job is to see that all nodes join the permanent set. That means I will be knowing all of my neighbors to reach from every node to every other node. I will be knowing that. Okay, na? So this is what is the meaning of that. So you have one set with A, and that is a tree with only one node. You expand the tree and go on adding other nodes in such a way that you find the least cost through traversal. And once you find the least cost, add that to your tree from the other set, add it to your set. So in that set should be null finally, and your set should be having all the nodes. So initially that set will be having maximum nodes except one node. Okay, so that's how you are supposed to do this. So if you are the root and your distance is 0, and if y is the neighbor itself, you know what is the cost from your node to the neighbor automatically. If it is not the neighbor, your cost is initially infinity. So this is your union. Again, they have given the same option, like set means union, right? So you try go on adding the nodes from the temporary set to the permanent set, like that. So you'll be updating that way using the minimum approach. So this is how it is. So this I have taken just to illustrate easy way. So initially you have only one node in your network. Then you go on adding, all other nodes. So you can see the final step after 5 iterations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the nodes are added to your tree. That means you know how to go from, say, root number 1, 2, 3 to all other nodes 4, 5, 6, 3, 2, everybody. Okay, this is how iteratively this Dijkstra algorithm works. Okay, this in the book, this is how it is given. So initially you start with A, and you have, they call it as this dashed lines, they call it as potential path, the thick lines they call it as path. Okay, that means once you finalize, it is called as a path. Potential path means you can go from A to either B or D, because both are your neighbors. Find the neighbor with the least cost. So 2 is least among 2 and 3, so you go from A to B. This is the one. So that thick path is given to you. Now once, that means now your new destination, new route will be B now, because you already started from A. Now you know that new node added to a tree is B. So I will start from the new node now. Who are the neighbors of new node? There is E and there is C, and already D was there in the list of your tentative nodes, right? Other set. Out of this, which is minimum again? You have 7, 6, and 3. So 3 becomes minimum. So you can choose, see here, A to D. So out of all the tentative nodes, please remember again, tentative nodes means this white colored one, which are not already in my set or in my tree. Which has the least value, that will be chosen as the next node to be added to the tree. So 7, infinity, infinity, 6, and 3. So 3 is the least. And if two of the nodes are having the same value, 3 and 3, you can choose any of them. Okay. 3 is, so who is added to your node tree now? A is added, B is added, latest is D. Now again, look from the point of view of D. Okay, and all other tentative nodes, which are the, so from D how to reach E, from D how to reach C, something like that. So if it is possible, look at the again distances, 7, infinity, infinity, 6. So which is least? 6 is least. So that means you will have to choose E as your next node. So that way you can see they're making different colors. You can see here, white colors means not yet added to the tree, they are tentative. This blue means they are permanent, added to the tree. That means you know the path already, something like that. So after so many iterations, this is for the given figure diagram in the book. Okay, this what example I have given is from some other book. Okay, this is from your book, the Farozan book. Okay, so this is how it is done. So I will try to stop here. Path vector, I don't go, it's there, you can as well read it. So this is the, in case they ask you for 3-4 marks, explain difference between distance vector and link state, something. So you can just write a small table like this, some 4 points. You can at least memorize and then write. So that's why I have given this. Okay. So any questions till now? So or shall I take 1-2 minutes break?
You can take a 2 minutes break.
So anybody wants to chat with any questions till now?
Yes, one question With near diagram, explain distance vector routing.
Students are there. Okay, some 20 people are there. Okay, fine. Don't know physically they are there or not, but it looks like 20 are there here.
One person has asked about distance vector routing.
Okay,
algorithm.
okay, I didn't get you. What is the question? Sorry.
With neat diagram, explain distance vector algorithm means not very clear. The question is not very clear.
With a diagram, distance vector routing, how to explain? Okay. Diagram you should take by yourself. I have taken the diagram from this book itself, whatever is there. So,
I think
see,
maybe
one thing I'll tell you, there is a difference between how do you do this in the theory and in the lab. Okay. In the lab, you have to write your own matrix. They'll give you this kind of a graph with some values. You should create matrix by yourself on pen and paper, using pen and paper, and enter that as a matrix in the program you see or whatever the program you are writing, and then do it. And then you are, that may be a little different one than the actual theory what we are showing. So what I'm showing is the concept here. So in the concept, what they ask in theory, explain distance vector routing. Sorry, explain distance vector routing. One question. Second question is write distance vector algorithm. That is this one, whatever is there in the book. Third one is with a for a given graph, explain how initialization and updation happens. These are the normal three categories of questions which will be asked in the thing. So in that case, you need not do anything. One graph like this, whatever we have taken here, not this graph, the complete graph. Sorry, yeah, this kind of a graph. If they have not given any graph in the question paper, you can take any graph of this sort and but your own numbers, whatever you want to do, and again look at the marks, please. Again, remember these are all two big topics. 6 marks or 10 marks or 12 marks, you should identify what is to be written actually. Okay, so don't try to write each and everything there, and you will end up having no time to complete your question paper. So you try to write only what is required. So according to me, what is required is you have to just write this Bellman-Ford equation as a theory, and then don't write this diagram and all, and then show one example. You have taken already one graph, show one example of how to initialize this. Don't write all the notes again, please note these points. Okay, so you have taken this graph, you write this theory, this small 4 lines, whatever I have written here, how to initialize the distance vector. Write any one or two here, that's enough. You don't need to write all of them. Okay, write any one or two as initialization. And once you do that, show one updation like this. How updation is done. Practically only one. Even if you are given a graph also, you can show only one update. You can't start writing all the updates in theory exam for 6 months or 8 months. It's impossible to write. Show one update with one node, any one node you have selected correctly, properly, and write. Similarly, all other nodes will be updating their tables. That is enough. Okay. Please remember this. In the same way, theory exam I'm writing. Practically in the laboratory, of course, yeah, you should execute that program. Whatever is given by your college, I do not know. And what your madam or sir has explained, that way only you should do in the lab exam. Theory exam, it's very easy. No need to write such a big one every time. Only one or two notes with respect to that, if you are able to explain and write this small theory, whatever I have given, is enough in the exam to write, even for 8 marks also. Please remember this. You can't show updation for all because multiple iterations will be going on in the router practically also. So all iterations we cannot show on pen and paper here. It is not possible. That is why we have the lab. We'll run a program and show how it works. So theory, we are not running anything there. So we are just writing it. That's enough, whatever I have told now.
Okay, sir.
No, I mean, is it satisfying? What are the answer I gave?
I think they have to reply for that.
No, who asked? Somebody asked that. So again, to everybody. So ensure that you will be writing only that theory and what is there. That's enough. Nothing else to be written in the theory exam. You can't write a program. That is why that already they have only given their own pseudo code. At least memorize that code and write. That's enough. You can't write a program there anyway. No
Another
need to
question
write a C program or anything. Okay.
Question is how much we should write and what to write. They're asking.
How much? That's what I'm telling. Once again, I'm repeating. No, see, I have given you, if you have observed the slides, I've given you 1, 2, 3 like this, right? Please remember this. Check this. The starting is this, the big heading. Then I'm writing 1, 2, 3. Please see here. So carefully observe what I have written. So if it is just 6 marks, don't try to do all these things. Don't try write one line only. What is distance vector? Is a one-dimensional array to represent. That's all. Don't try to write this diagram and show. Don't do all those things. Directly go to this. How DVR operates. It initializes the tables and then it updates. Again, don't write the complete one. Write only 1 or 2 nodes. That's enough. And updating is done like this, and it will be repeated for all the nodes periodically, and then until final value is this one, this line with no infinity value, the distance vector will converge. And
Hello? Hello?
Now, sir, you're audible. Hello?
Ma'am, it's me, ma'am.
ಗೌರವ್ ಅದು ಸರ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲ
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿಲ್ಲ.
ಸರ್ ಅದು ಹ್ಯಾಂಗ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಅನ್ಕೊಂತೀನಿ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್.
ಹಾ.
Gaurav?
Yeah, I'm not able to.
Yes, sir. 2 minutes, sir. Yeah, because we have to give you access. Gaurav?
Yeah,
Gaurav, can you make Krishnananda L as the presenter?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. He's the presenter now. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes, he is the presenter.
okay, I'll just check.
So there's some disturbance.
Yeah, but I'm not able to.
Gaurav, mute Krishnananda. Okay. By the time his presentation starts, you mute him. Mute him.
Yes, sir. You can continue.
Sorry.
So there's some
Okay.
mic problem in your system.
Oh, sorry. There's some noise from somewhere. Visible now, Gaurav?
It's visible.
I have shared. Is it visible?
So please check your mic and your earphones. There's a lot of disturbance. Please check once. Gaurav, unmute and check the sound quality. If the sound is just like that, mute again.
Okay.
Sir, you have to check, sir. There's still a lot of disturbance.
Okay, now is it audible?
No, sir. No. It is the same thing. We are having echo. There's echo.
Screen is visible?
Screen is is not visible, sir, but your audio is not good. It is echoing for us. There's a lot of echo in the audio.
Hello.
Still, okay. Still there's echo, sir. Microphone settings. You can check even the microphone settings, sir.
So there is some issue with my.
Sir, don't keep mic near. Don't keep the mobile phone near you, sir. Maybe there are some other devices which is mingling with the current network. Try to keep other devices aside, sir, and just check.
So why there is echo?
What is the problem?
Sir, I think we can use the system mic. Are you using speakers?
This is I'm trying to use the laptop itself.
Okay, sir. Then you change to earphones and try, sir. Headsets.
Audible now?
Better, sir. Better.
Little better. Okay.
So you have to
Sorry.
share your screen. Gaurav, can you give access to sir?
I've already given.
Yes, sir. You can continue.
Is visible now?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Sorry for the disturbance.
Okay, sir. It
All
happens.
technical issues. So all technical people, we are getting only technical issues.
You should get, sir.
Okay. Is it audible now?
Yes, yes, it is audible.
Okay. So let me go to the last module, transport layer, which is very important for the process delivery. So what we have seen in network layer with the routing is we can identify a host on the network using the IP address, but the packet should be delivered to a particular process running on that computer. Okay, very simple example. Again, maybe LKG example. What I give is, suppose you want to meet your friend in his house. You first find his house. In the house, there are many people, but you would like to talk to only your friend, right? So that means that is process. So your host will be running several processes. For example, if you take a browser itself, you'll have several tabs open. I know one for Facebook, one for YouTube, one for Gmail, so many. So your Gmail client should talk to Gmail server process. Your Facebook client process should talk to Facebook server. Data from Facebook client should not go to a Gmail process, something like that, right? So identifying the process also is very, very important, not simply identifying the host. That's why transport layer plays a very important role in the TCP/IP stack. That's why one complete module is given for this transport layer. Okay, hope you could understand this difference. That's why I given this diagram also, so you can easily understand this. So number of processes running on client and server. corresponding processes should communicate, not simply the corresponding hosts. Okay. So in network layer, we just now said IP address we are using for identifying 32-bit. Then how to identify processes? That's also given by ICANN, which is 16-bit port numbers. 16-bit means 0 to 65, 535, any number between that. So, and ICANN has made some categories of this. And usually what client uses is called ephemeral port number, and what server is called as well-known. Ephemeral is temporary, remember like that, because suppose you are just uploading your photo on your Facebook and you can close your Facebook session. So you don't need that continuous support. Suppose if Facebook server itself is closed, no client can access, right? That's why the client can be ephemeral, server must be well-known, to be known publicly to all. That's the meaning. Okay, this is how it is example. So every client will know the process of the well-known port of the corresponding server. That should be known. Then only it will be communicating. Okay. Then this one. IP address versus port number. This is what I have told. Earlier, you identify the host with the IP address. In that host, you want to identify process number 13, which is, for example, here daytime, which tells you the time of the day, something like that. So you can see these brown boxes. So many processes. Out of that, I'm accessing 13. Okay. So ICANN has given this. So 0 to 1023 is well-known ports. 1024 to 49151 is registered ports. And 49152 to 6553 dynamic. That means they need not be registered. They are neither controlled by ICANN. You can use it for any of the processes. So theory is given there. You can as well read some examples. For example, if you are using HTTP application layer, then the port number is TCP. I mean, HTTP uses TCP and port number 80. This is a standard fixed one. HTTPS, so you get that now. Now it's security purpose. So you again it runs on TCP, but on port number 443. Your email, which uses SMTP protocol, uses again TCP with port number 25. Similarly, your domain name system will use UDP with port number 53, something like that. Okay, some example just to know. So a port number and IP address together is called as socket address. IP and port number together is called as socket. So a socket on client, that means you are binding the IP address and the port number together. They together make a communication. That's the meaning. Okay. Then encapsulation, decapsulation, we already know from module 1. This at every layer, but they are given separately in transport layer. Like, so what is encapsulation? Application layer message comes to you. The transport layer will add a header that called encapsulation, and through a logical churn. Again, very importantly, is it audible?
Yes, sir, it's audible.
Okay. Slide is shown correctly.
Slide, yeah. Can you try changing the slide, sir?
Now there is theory. Earlier there was diagram.
No, it's
This
not
is-
varying, I think. It's process to process communication. It's there.
Oh, it's there only still. Okay.
There in the first slide only.
Now what is there? Page number 3.
Still loading. Still loading.
Okay.
There will be some delay with like your network and mine. Yeah, now
yeah.
it's able. Like,
Page number 3 is.
there's a table. Yeah, page number 3.
Okay. Then let me go to page number 4 now. Diagram.
Encapsulation, decapsulation. Yeah.
Yes. Fine. Okay. This is what I was saying. Students, please once again remember, when I am at the transport layer, we are just looking into a programming aspects. So as we have 5 layers, the bottom 2 most of the time deal with the physical hardware and other things. The network layer is a bridge between the top 2 and the bottom 2. The top 2 layers are basically part of your operating system or your application software. So the transport layer is okay. So you can see here the application layer provides data to the transport layer, and that payload is added with the header at the sender side called as encapsulation, and this will be sent through, of course, the physical network, but we are not bothered about it. So we assume that it has come to the destination. Destination transport layer will remove this header, that is called as decapsulation. Simple. Okay. Then similarly, multiplexing and demultiplexing. So what is multiplexing and demultiplexing? Several application layer processes may be running on a single transport layer protocol. Like earlier in the table I showed, HTTP runs on TCP, SMTP runs on TCP, HTTPS runs on TCP. So several such protocols at the same time may be using the service of transport layer. So that is done at the sender side. Similarly, receiver should be appropriately demultiplexing them. That is the data from P1, which is that message M1, which is sent through this, should go to P1 on the server side, not to P3. So that is how the distribution should be done correctly. So which upper layer protocol is using TCP at the destination side, TCP should deliver the data to that application only, not to some other. Okay, that's how it is multiplexing and demultiplexing. Okay, a small theory and all I have written anyway, so you can as well read it and write in the exam if it is asked. Very important concept is pushing and pulling. How the transport layer works in general. Okay, so you can see the diagram easily. And all these concepts we are, as we said, client server. We also, like if you have studied OS, you will be knowing these names: producer, consumer. The process which generates data is called producer. The process which accepts this is called as receiver or consumer. Simple thing. Okay. So the transport layer at the sender side is the producer, and other side is the consumer. Okay. So now, if producer produces data without the consumer requesting for it, this is called pushing. Okay, that means without knowing the consumer's capability or the receiver buffer size or whatever, simply it is pushing the data. So naturally, it may overflow at the receiver. So then there is a feedback to number 2. You can see here this arrow mark from the consumer to tell the producer that don't send me so much of data. That is called flow control mechanism. So this is flow control is required in pushing. Similarly, in the other one is first consumer will request and next producer will deliver. Then it is called pulling. Okay. So this will be very useful for next topics what we discuss. Okay. So flow control is a mechanism of controlling or adjusting the data rate of the producer with respect to the capability of the consumer. For example, now I am doing this class, 2 hours may be too long really, or too hectic for you to digest. So you may say 1 hour is enough. So that is like consumer is not able to accept so much of data coming in. That's the meaning. That's called as flow control. Okay. And flow control can happen at two. One is at the sender side itself, that is between application and transport of the sender itself. Okay, because application may try to push the data so much, but transport layer may have a little buffer. Yeah. Okay. Similarly, from sender to receiver, it is sent. Receiver buffer may be little small or little not very big. So again, receiver may send a flow control back to sender. So flow control from transport layer of sender to application layer of sender, one method. Other scenario is feedback or flow control from receiver transport layer to sender transport. How do we implement this flow control is to use the buffers, right? Like we can store the data and then send it little later whenever the receiver is ready to accept something like that. And when the buffer of the sending transport layer is full, it informs the application layer to stop passing messages. Okay. When it is not full, it can accept. Okay. So one easy way is you assume that single memory location is there because it's very trivial. We can't hold any data there. Easy way is that when it is full, give a feedback saying that don't send anything. When it is empty, accept something like that. Okay. Then error control was also done at the transport layer. Again, please remember at IP I said we can't do flow control, error control because it is unreliable and connectionless. It doesn't do anything as such. So all that job of congestion control, flow control, error control, all that extra task is put in the transport layer by the designers. Okay, so all this will be done by the error control, the transport layer. Again, for all these things, we use sequence numbering. In module 1, you would have studied frame and acknowledgement numbers. Same way, here also we use some numbers for segment sent and this one. And acknowledgement is, and acknowledgement is basically we say modulo 2 or 2 power m arithmetic. That means you need the numbering, you need to number them in binary, so you need m bits. So suppose m is 4, you can go from 4 zeros to 4 ones. So in decimal it becomes 0 to 15, right? So after 15, if I want to send the next data, what should I do? I can't represent 16, 17, 18, etc. because I have only 4 bits. So I have to wrap around. That means 16th data will be numbered as 0. 17th data will be numbered as 1. So I'll be reusing the same sequence numbers. Okay, that's how it is done. That's why it is called as modulo 2 power m. So modulo means remainder. So you take the last one. After that, you can't go to the next one with that number of bits. So you recycle the numbers once again. That's how it is. Acknowledgement also similar. Similarly, that is acknowledgement can be either cumulative or selective. Okay. And for this, we use the same concept of sliding window, which you would have known earlier little. So what you understand is a window you can identify as a circular concept or a linear concept. Suppose you have 4-bit sequence number, you can have 16 segments numbered from 0 to 15. So some you have sent and some you are supposed to send. So what you have sent but not yet acknowledged. Those are called as outstanding. Okay, so this blue color you can see. So 0, 1, 2, 3 are sent. They're waiting for the acknowledgement. So those packets are called as outstanding. Suppose you get a acknowledgement for packet 0, you can see this blue color has been removed. So now who is the outstanding packet? 1. Right? Because 0 has been acknowledged. And you can go ahead like that. Another way is this linear way of arrangement. So you can have a window of so much. So you have a concept of window in transport layer. Okay, window size is normally less than the total buffer size. Okay, so window is an abstract concept just to understand the operation. Okay, so a window is one slot or one bucket you can assume where I will be storing my packets. And until I exhaust one window, I cannot go to the next window, next cycle of the window, like that. Okay. Suppose let us say I have a window, this black entire thing, 7, no? Totally 7 packets. Out of that, 4 I have sent, but not yet acknowledged. Okay. And after that, I have sent the 5th packet also. I have sent all the packets now. Now the window is full. So next window is there. For example, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, etc. Form the next cycle of the window. But I can't do anything there because I have to acknowledge this. Okay. So at least one of them is acknowledged. I can move the window forward. This is called a sliding window. Very simple concept of sliding window physically in your house or college. Earlier we had opening and closing type of windows. To save the space, what we do in the door, sorry, in the wall itself, we make a sliding window concept. So you can slide the window forward or backward depending on how much air you want to get inside your room, right? Same way here. The window will move forward based on acknowledgements are received or not. And congestion also will be done. Congestion is a scenario where load on the network is exceeding the capacity of the network. That is the definition for congestion. Okay, that's given there. Congestion control also will be done. Then transport layer can give both connectionless and connection-oriented service. Connectionless service means in advance there is no logical path established between source and destination. So you can see, yeah, in the diagram. So that means the packets may travel different paths through the network downwards and then may reach out of order also. See here you have sent message 0, message 1, message 2 in that order, but you received here message 0, message 2 and message 1. So the transport layer at the receiver should rearrange all of them, properly and then only send to the application. It cannot send out of order packets as it is. Okay, please remember that. So connectionless may have this problem. Okay, and in connectionless another thing is, if the numbering is not there generally, then we will not know which message is lost, and whatever we receive, we feel only so much has come or so much has been given from the source. So that is why it is not such a good approach for stream of data. For simple messages where exchange is limited to a very small message size, then this is enough. The UDP actually is a connectionless protocol. Connect to connection oriented. So we should make a connection establishment first, and then packet should be sent. And if at all they arrive out of order, it will actually hold that packet, take everything, and then rearranges, and then it should be sent. But in connectionless, it won't do that way. So it will not even know that because numbering is not there. So it will simply deliver as it comes. So the application may not understand what is the data received. So connection oriented and connectionless. Then the standard protocol, that those connection oriented and connectionless will be represented as finite state machines. In module 1 you would have studied that, so I'll not go for that, we'll go for this directly. So what are the protocols here? Simple protocol, go back n, sorry, stop and wait, go back n and selective repeat. There are 4 such protocols in the transport layer here. And stop and wait is similar to what you studied in data link layer in module 1. So you send one packet and then wait for the acknowledgement. If you get the acknowledgement within the timeout period, you send the next packet. Otherwise, you have to retransmit, something like that. Okay? That's how it is. But it is at the transport layer here. That was at the data link layer. The difference is data link layer works from hop to hop. That is node to immediate next node. Transport layer works only in the source host and destination host, not in the intermediate routers or any other device. Please remember this. So that is why it is more important. It is end-to-end connectivity, not simply node-to-node connectivity. Okay. Okay. Then again, how do you do this? You will have to do this sequence and acknowledgement numbers. Stop and wait means your receive window and send window size is only 1. What is the meaning? At a time, you can send 1 frame and then you can receive only 1 frame. That's it. Okay, you can't do much more than that. That's the meaning. Okay. So acknowledgement number and sequence numbers of size m bits earlier I told. Similar way you should be doing like this also now. But the advantage in stop and wait is you have to just one more important thing is, why do we need these sequence numbers? One, to understand like which packet has lost, or so that we can retransmit. More importantly, if at all the same packet is received twice, the receiver should be able to distinguish the duplicate packet, right? So that is why sequence numbering is very, very important. So in stop and wait, at a time we are getting only one packet at the receiver. Suppose I get another packet, I have to just distinguish the next packet with the present packet. That is the number of the next and the present. If they are same, I can discard it as a duplicate. Otherwise, I have to accept it. That's all. So I am just differentiating only 2 packets at a time. So I can just use 1 bit numbering. That is that m will be just 1 bit. Because with 1 bit, I can have 2 options, right? Binary, 0 or 1. So I can number the packet as packet 0 or packet 1. If I get 2 packet zeros, it is duplicate definitely, because I'm expecting packet 1 after packet 0. So this is called as modulo 2 arithmetic, because m is 1. Okay. In general, modulo 2 power m, but because m is 1, it is modulo 2. That means what? At a time, you have to distinguish between the next frame or the present frame with the previous frame. So just distinguishing 2 frames requires just 1 bit sequence number. Okay, that can be a question. Why 1 bit sequence number is or justify something like that. And same operation can be explained using FSM. Again, you can see I have given ABC some separate parts for this theory. So depending on what they ask, if they ask FSM, so if they ask FSM, otherwise don't write. Yeah. Or if they ask for say 8 marks, explain stop and wait, then you have to write a FSM. And there is something called as a flow diagram also later. That is this diagram what I'm showing. So again, it depends. With flow diagram explain means you have to write this. Without that, you can just explain only this much with the FSM only. So look at the question and the marks allocated. Based on that, now try to write the appropriate answers. Some issues again, I think. Is it audible? Some lagging, I think.
Yes, sir, it's audible, but it's a bit lagging. Maybe network
Lagging,
issue.
Yeah, there's some a lot of things.
There'll be some network issues.
So I think it's almost 1 hour 50 minutes. It's some. So can we? Shall I finish this and stop here? It will be better, I think. Lunchtime, I think people may be already hungry to go back.
Lunch break, yeah.
Yeah. So shall we schedule some other time? That would be better, I think. So that we can.
Continue till 2 o'clock, sir. Still 10 minutes.
I'll continue, but whatever is here, I'll try to complete here, because topic is little, large and wide also. So that's why. Okay. So FSM for stop and wait. So you can see here, the sender can be in 2 states, which is called as a ready state or a blocking state. Because stop and wait, easily remember that. So you send a packet, stop, and wait for acknowledgement. That is called as blocking state. So what will be done with the ready state? Your request has come from the application. You make a packet with a sequence number yes, save a copy, and send it. Why save a copy? because you have to retransmit now if there is some problem. So we need to have a copy. Then start the timer. Timer is required because you need to wait for acknowledgement for only a limited time. You can't wait indefinitely. Then it goes to a blocking state. In blocking state, 3 events are possible. The number of arrows you can see leaving that will say how many events will be there in that state. Okay, the states are this circle type of thing or a oval shaped one. Okay, so 3 arrows here. The first arrow I'll take this. Okay, this whatever I'm showing on the mouse screen. Error free acknowledgement has come with acknowledgement s plus 1. So this concept again 1. Suppose you send f0, you are getting a1, right? Because the receiver says all have received correctly. Next you send the packet with a sequence number plus 1 to the previous whatever. So if you have sent 0 earlier, next send me the packet with the number 1. If you have already sent 1, you have to send me 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1 is actually 2. But in modulo 2, that is like a XOR operation. So 1 plus 1 is 0 again. So 2 cannot be represented. So the next one you have to send is 0 again. So that is the meaning. That is s equal to s plus 1 in modulo 2, please remember. So then it will slide the window. Like what is the window size? Please remember, send window is also of size 1. Receive window is also of size 1. You can send one packet at a time, and receiver can accept one packet with the correct sequence number. That is why window size is 1. Okay. Now suppose timeout happened and you didn't get the acknowledgement. Okay, this is for the sender. Okay, this is for the sender. So you will resend that packet and restart your timer and wait for acknowledgement. Suppose you get the corrected acknowledgement or an acknowledgement with a number not related to the outstanding packet. That is not this s plus 1. Suppose let us say you have sent 0 and you are expecting a1 acknowledgement number 1, but you get some a4, a5, some wrong number like that, then you will not accept that. Okay. Then coming to the receiver. Receiver will always be in only one state, ready state, because receiver has to be ready with accepting 1 frame at a time. So advantage is, suppose you again 3 events, error free packet with sequence number R, whatever is expecting arrived. Then you deliver that to the application layer. Then slide the receive window with, that is, make R equal to R plus 1. That is, you expect the next one. And send acknowledgement with this new R, whatever you updated. This is correct operation. Okay. Then second one, error-free acknowledgement, error-free packet with, this is wrong, with sequence number not equal to R. Okay. 1 is not equal to R, 1 is equal to R. Second time if you are received, then it is a duplicate. Okay. Clear? Equal to R 2 times they have given, assuming that this is a duplicate packet. A third option is this, sequence number not equal to R, then you have to discard that. So that theory is explained here with 3 or 4 lines. This is enough to write in the exam also. The last one will be flow diagram. Now the FSM, finite state machine, is representation of the operation of any protocol using the operation represented as states. Like if you remember digital electronics with counters, like you have state 0, state 1, state 2, or Moore and Millet machines if you have studied. Similarly, we are representing a protocol operation as finite state machine. How many states it can be there, something like that. But flow diagram gives you the timing activity. What time, what is happening. So you can see the timing is on the vertical scale here. This is the time scale. So this gives you a complete picture compared to FSM. That's the advantage is to know this. So this is sender transport layer. This is transport layer of the receiver. So let's start with your numbering 0, let us say, and 0 you have sent. and you expect acknowledgement 1, both are received correctly, it's good, no issues. So here it is slided forward, that is R equal to R plus 1 and S equal to S plus 1. So this is a case 1, a normal case where packet and acknowledgement both are received safely. Second case, packet 1 is sent but it is lost. So no acknowledgement will come. So there will be timeout. Okay. So it has not updated. Please, it is still at 1 only. So it will resend the same packet. Okay. Now it is received correctly. Now it will move forward because it will expect now next packet with number 0. So acknowledgement 0 comes. So it will go up. So this is second case. Third case, packet correctly sent and received also. Acknowledgement also sent, but acknowledgement is lost in the channel. Okay, it is not reaching the source. So what happens now? The source does not know what is the issue. So after timeout, it tries to resend the same packet once again. But already it received 0, it is expecting 1. So packet 0 would be discarded as a duplicate by the receiver. This is the advantage of the sequence numbering. Without numbering, you don't know whether you receive a duplicate or the old one or the new one. So sequence numbering helps you to identify the duplicate packet. And 1 bit is enough because at a time you are comparing the present and the previous. Okay, that's how it is done. So this explanation is given here. The efficiency of stop and wait is very, very less. Why? Because suppose you have a 1 Mbps channel and you are sending just one packet of 100 bytes or say 1000 bytes. So you are wasting the capacity of the channel, right? So much of channel unutilization is there in this, underutilization is there in this particular protocol. Okay? So it can be improved by sending more number of packets without waiting for each acknowledgement. That is what we next study as sliding window protocols. Go back and selective repeat. Okay. Another way to improve little bit efficiency is pipelining. That is sending more than one. Okay. Or you can also have piggybacking. That is, instead of sending only acknowledgement, which is a small frame, a small size packet, whenever the next data has to be sent, along with that, you can send the acknowledgement as a free ride. That is piggybacking. Okay. The efficiency is that anyway not at all good in this particular thing. So that example I have given what is the utilization of the channel. So I think we'll try to end up there with any questions here.
There are not any questions.
Yeah, not audible correctly. I understand some problems. Maybe I will try it some other day. I don't mind. If I'm free, I can take another session also. Not a problem. If students are willing and if madam is willing to take it up.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for spending so much of time with all this trouble. Hope I would have given at least some insight into this.
On behalf of Bangalore section, we thank you, sir, for taking out your time and helping the students. I hope it will be helpful for the students to write their exams, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so shall we close?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are not any questions there, so we can close it.
Any questions? Yeah, you can. Okay, if you want, you can take my mail ID. I can't write here. You can note down. Okay, I think I can do in the chat. I think. So if anybody wants, they can mail to me. Thanks, Gaurav, for all that arrangement. Thank you, Dr. Pushpamala ma'am, for giving this opportunity. In case anything is needed, please let me know. you all.
Okay.